The darkness pressed heavy inside the Florida death row facility, the kind of stillness that rang louder than noise itself. Strip lights hummed along the walkway, throwing gray shadows across bare cement walls. Officers moved through their shifts with clockwork precision, radios crackling at their hips. Nothing ever shifted here. Nothing ever disturbed the routine until that night in Cell 29. Carlos Moreno, inmate number 267, had been on death row for 7 years. His execution date was just days away. He was a man resigned to fate, a man who had stopped pleading his case long ago. Yet on this night, something stirred inside him. Kneeling on the hard floor, clutching a small ceramic crucifix that his mother had passed to him during visitation, he whispered prayers that he had not dared speak in years. His voice was hoarse, his eyes red, but his words carried weight, as if every syllable was a plea sent beyond those steel bars. And then something happened. At first, Officer Martinez thought it was his flashlight playing tricks. As he turned the corner for his midnight round, he saw a faint golden glow seeping from the cracks of Cell 29. He frowned, switched off the beam, and yet the light did not vanish. It pulsed warm and steady like a heartbeat. He approached cautiously, his boots echoing against the corridor. Inside, Carlos remained on his knees, but he was no longer alone. Standing near the back wall was a man no one had seen enter. He wore a plain white robe, simple and radiant in the dim prison light. His hair fell to his shoulders, his beard was dark, and his eyes carried a depth no human gaze could match. Martinez froze, his throat tight. The figure stepped forward, and without raising his voice, filled the entire cell with words that carried both authority and tenderness. "Do not be afraid, Carlos. I am here." Carlos's body shook. Tears welled in his eyes. Long before the glow of Cell 29, there was a boy named Carlos running barefoot on the dusty streets of Miami's Little Havana. His story began miles south across the Caribbean in a modest village outside San Salvador. His parents, Luis and Rosa Moreno, were like countless others, dreamers with calloused hands and tired eyes who believed the United States promised a better tomorrow. Carlos was only 5 when a Moreno family crossed the border. He remembered little of that journey. A crowded bus, a night spent in a church basement, the sound of his mother whispering prayers while clutching a small ceramic object wrapped in cloth. That crucifix carved decades earlier by Rosa's grandfather was of Jesus Christ. Its glaze was chipped, the ceramic worn smooth by generations of hands. To Rosa, it was not just an heirloom. It was proof that God traveled with them. The new life was harsher than they had imagined. At school, when classmates mocked his accent, he whispered prayers under his breath. When the landlord banged on their door, demanding late rent, he pressed his palms together like his mother had shown him. But faith did not shield him from reality. He watched Luis return home with hands cracked and bleeding, paychecks barely enough to cover groceries. He saw Rosa collapse into a chair after 12 hours of labor, hiding her pain behind tired laughter. And he learned that in their neighborhood, respect often came not from prayers, but from the colors of the gang you wore. At 11, tragedy struck. Luis's life was stolen by a construction accident, a falling beam, a scream, and silence that never ended. The payout barely covered the funeral. Overnight, Rosa became both mother and father, working twice as hard, praying twice as long. Carlos's faith cracked that year. Why did God take his father? Why did not prayers protect them from hunger and debt? That is when the streets began to whisper. On the corner of Calle Ocho, older boys leaned against graffiti-covered walls, their sneakers spotless, their pockets full of bills. They called out to Carlos, "You do not have to live like that. We take care of our own." They wore gang colors like armor, walked with a confidence Carlos envied. At home, he saw nothing but unpaid bills and his mother's tired face. Outside, he saw power, respect, and the promise of quick money. By 13, Carlos wore gang colors. By 15, he knew how to fight, how to steal, how to lie. Each crime was a step further from the boy who once folded his hands in prayer. The police caught him at 16. Petty theft, nothing violent. 3 months in juvenile detention. The second arrest came at 18. Assault, 6 months in county jail. Rosa sat across the glass during visits, pressing the little ceramic crucifix against the divider. "Look at him, Carlos," she pleaded. "He suffered for you." One night in Miami, his cousin Diego made a phone call that would pull Carlos into a storm from which there would be no return. A convenience store, a quick job, easy money, just 5 minutes. Carlos hesitated. Deep inside, a voice whispered, "Do not go." But the debts were piling. The streets were calling. Miami, April 22nd, 2004. By midnight, the plan was in motion. Carlos met Diego on the corner of Flagler and 12th. A third man waited with them, Ramon, a tall tattooed stranger with a chilling silence. He would be the driver. Diego handed Carlos a gun. "Just in case," he muttered. Inside, the store smelled of old wood and stale coffee. Behind the counter stood a weary shopkeeper, his glasses thick and his hands trembling. Diego barked the order. "Money now." Then the bell over the door jingled. A police officer stepped in. "Police, drop your weapons." Time collapsed. The gun shot. Officer Daniel Foster staggered and fell hard against the floor. 2 days later, Carlos's world imploded. Police swarmed his apartment before dawn, pounding on the door until it splintered open. Neighbors watched as officers dragged him out in handcuffs. Diego had fled to Honduras. Ramon had disappeared without a trace. Carlos was left as the only suspect standing. In the interrogation room, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Detectives hurled questions, accusing him of pulling the trigger. Carlos swore he had not. "I did not shoot. I swear it." But his words fell flat against the stone wall of their conviction. The gun recovered at the scene bore his fingerprints. Witnesses identified him as one of the men who fled. And most damning of all, a corrections officer named Marcus Webb claimed he had seen Carlos fire the fatal shot. His mother visited him in the holding cell. Her face pressed against the glass, tears streaked her cheeks. She lifted the little ceramic crucifix. "Look at him, Carlos. He knows the truth. He will not abandon you." 6 months later, the Miami-Dade County Courthouse buzzed with reporters and attorneys. The case of State of Florida versus Carlos Angel Moreno was about to begin. For the prosecution, it was simple. A young gang member had shot and killed a decorated police officer during a convenience store robbery. Carlos sat at the defendant's table dressed in an ill-fitting suit borrowed from the county jail. Beside him was his attorney, Thomas Rivera, a newly minted public defender whose nervousness was visible. Across the aisle stood Rachel Hartman, the district attorney known for her sharp intellect and unrelenting style. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "this case is not complicated. The defendant, Carlos Moreno, entered a convenience store with intent to rob. When Officer Daniel Foster arrived to stop the crime, this man shot him point blank in cold blood. Officer Foster was a father of 3, a husband, a man who served this community for 20 years. The prosecution paraded witnesses before the jury. The convenience store clerk testified that Carlos was there. He had not seen who fired, but he pointed directly at Carlos as one of the masked men. Then came the gun pulled from the crime scene. Carlos's fingerprints clear on the handle. And then the nail in the coffin, Marcus Webb, a corrections officer who claimed to have been nearby that night. He took the stand, voice steady, eyes locked on Carlos. "I saw him," Webb said, pointing across the courtroom. "I saw that man fire the shot that killed Officer Foster." Carlos's stomach dropped. It was a lie. When it came time for the defense, Rivera did his best. He argued the lack of direct evidence, highlighted the missing suspects, questioned Webb's credibility, but his inexperience showed. The closing argument sealed his fate. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Carlos Angel Moreno, guilty of murder in the first degree." Judge Harrison adjusted his glasses. The Rayford facility in Florida is a place where time moves differently. For Carlos Moreno, condemned to die, the walls of his 6-by-9 cell closed in tighter with every breath. His mother came every week, riding 2 buses and walking 3 miles under the brutal Florida sun just to sit across a pane of glass from her son. Each time she pressed the little ceramic crucifix against the divider. "Pray with me, hijo," she begged. But Carlos turned his head away. Where was God when they condemned me? Then came Father Gabriel Reyes. The prison chaplain had spent decades ministering to men with no hope left. He sat across from Carlos and talked about soccer, about pupusas, about El Salvador where his parents were born. One afternoon, his voice broke. Padre, I swear I did not fire that gun. I'm dying for something I did not do. The chaplain nodded. Courts fail. Witnesses lie. But God does not. He knows your heart. By his 5th year on death row, something shifted. He began attending the small chapel services. One Sunday, Father Gabriel read from the Gospel of John. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. That night in his cell, he did something he had not done in over a decade. He knelt on the cold concrete and prayed. God, I do not know if you hear me, but if you do, help my mother. Give her peace. And if it is possible, let the truth be known. By the 7th summer on death row, sleep came slowly, then all at once, and with it, a dream that felt nothing like a dream. He found himself standing in an open field, green grass stretching endlessly under a sky painted with impossible blue. Across the field, a figure approached. The man wore a simple white robe, his steps quiet, his presence commanding. Long dark hair framed his face, and a beard shadowed his jaw. But it was the eyes that made his knees weaken. Miguel, the man said, your mother has never stopped praying for you. Continue to pray. The truth will be revealed. Do not be afraid. The warmth of that touch spread through his body like fire and water at once. Carlos woke, his body drenched in sweat. The cell looked the same, but everything felt different. It was real. The evening of his final days fell heavy. Carlos had 3 days left. At 5 in the afternoon, Warden James Morrison stopped by the cell. Most condemned men requested steak or fried chicken. Carlos's answer was different. No meal, sir. Just this. He lifted the ceramic crucifix. Around 3 in the morning, the air inside the cell grew warm, almost luminous. Carlos opened his eyes and froze. In the far corner stood a man in a white robe. Do not be afraid, Carlos, he said. I am here. Officer Martinez approached cell 29 for his final round. Through the bars, a faint golden glow filled the cell, radiating from the ceramic crucifix. Within minutes, guards gathered. Then came Marcus Webb. He collapsed to his knees. I lied. Carlos did not shoot that officer. It was Ramon Silva.